Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. Um, it's morning for me. It's afternoon for Tariq. It's evening for others. So, just thank you for making the time to join us. Um, so I'm gonna just I'm gonna kick us off and first of all, just kind of frame this conversation and today's session. And first of all, just to say this is the first speaker series session and conversation that we've had since the announcement of a ceasefire a few days ago, um, marking the end of 2 years of absolute and sheer brutality and monstrosity. And I think, you know, we've kind of hosted a series of conversations over the last 2 years, focusing specifically on Gaza. We were calling them the Gaza Chronicles. They were kind of like um, a sub faction of our speaker series. And we had highlighted the work that Taawon was doing at one point, also early on in all of this. Um, Tariq and I were talking a little bit earlier before we joined, kind of in the green room pre-recording, and just kind of touching base and talking about how to frame today's conversation. Um, and I know, while I'd love to be a little bit more hopeful, I think at the very least, the thing that we can be the most grateful for is that there has been a ceasing of the absolute violence, and the killing and the slaughtering of innocent men, women, and children. That's at the very least. And then at the very most, we can hope for some kind of, trajectory that brings justice and peace and retribution for what's been happening. So with that framing, I want to also just contextualize the conversation we're having today and to let you know a little bit about the organization and the speaker that we have with us. So Taawon is one of the Arab region's largest independent nonprofit organizations, and really one of the most important in terms of when it comes to Palestine and all issues that affect Palestinians. It was founded in 1983. It also goes by Welfare Association in English, but it is Taawun, مؤسسة Taawun in Arabic. For more than the last 40 years, this organization has served really as a lifeline for Palestinians. It has helped to preserve cultural heritage. It's helped to expand access to education. It's helped strengthen health and community services. And it's provided really urgent relief in times of crisis, and this current or latest genocide notwithstanding. Um, to date, Taawun has implemented over 4,000 different projects. It's reached more than 1 million Palestinians across Palestine, across Lebanon, and across the diaspora. And it's done that by mobilizing both Arab and international philanthropy, and it's honestly become a trusted home for solidarity for Palestinians, and has taken kind of this idea of transforming generosity into resilience, into opportunity, and into hope for future generations. And it's unlikely that you'll speak to any Palestinian who hasn't heard of Ta'awun. Um, I mean, I myself have at least 13, 14 friends who are in the General Assembly of Taawon. So it's a really well-known entity and a very well-trusted and cherished entity. And in the context of today's conversation and kind of looking at Gaza and the situation in Gaza, we know that over the last 2 years, the war has left an estimated 39,000, maybe 40,000 children without one or both parents. There have been comments made that this is one of the most catastrophic events, leading to one of the largest kind of demographics of orphans in the world. Um, it's The international philanthropic community has been called upon to stand in solidarity not only with Gaza, but with Gaza's children, to make sure that they're not forgotten. And in response to this, Taawon launched a program called the NOOR program, which is what we'll focus on today, but we're really just going to kind of see where the conversation goes, and ask Tariq to kind of give us some of his insights and his experience. And this NOOR program is one of Taawon's most ambitious humanitarian initiatives to date. So it offers an 18-year, so this is kind of a sustainable, over time, holistic journey of care. It provides education, healthcare, mental health, and psychosocial support, social care, urgent humanitarian relief, and really is positioned more than just a short-term aid. It's a long-term commitment to dignity, to healing, and to hope for an entire generation of orphaned children in Gaza. Dr. Tareq Emtairah is the Director General of Taawon. Um, He brings over 30 years of experience in international energy, climate, economic transformation, but also has had leadership roles at various UN agencies. And at Taawon, obviously, he oversees the humanitarian development programs with a focus on Gaza, obviously, in this moment in time, but spans the entire breadth of Taawon's programming. So, with that, I am going to turn it over to Tariq. Just first of all, say hello, and ask you maybe just to give a 30-second introduction to your work at Taawon, this moment, what you're feeling about this moment, what you're feeling after these last 2 years. Do you have any hope? Maybe you can give me some. So, anyway, welcome.
Thank you so much, Naila. This is thank you for first of all and the Arab Foundations Forum for having me in your series of conversations. They are extremely valuable and important that they also bring us all the foundations that are active in development and humanitarian work to share experiences and exchange thoughts. Um, and also, thank you for framing the context. You did it better than I can do, especially about the role of Taawon and its history. So I'm not going to go into that direction, but I think, as you said, I wanted just to share the immediate feelings about the current situation. And in essence, we are trying to be hopeful and optimistic. Of course, we are hopeful in the sense of the resilience and the steadfastness of the people of Gaza, and seeing them the last few days going back again from the south, Deir al-Balah, and carrying and returning. So this is the second or third return that happens back to the north. It's extremely moving and extremely gives a lot of hope and a lot of messages that the people of Gaza, they don't want to leave Gaza, despite all the genocidal war atrocities and killing that has been happening, and the resilience of the people of Gaza to want to rebuild. And I mean, so I was on the morning, and then in a call. Usually, I have these conversations with the team, especially my colleague Maham Hassan, who is the director of the Orphan program, the NOOR program, from Gaza, from Deir al-Balah. Actually, she's in Deir al-Balah. She moved a month ago because of the destruction of facilities in Gaza City, and now she's ready to go. And she said that a lot of people are moving back, but the biggest worry, of course, shelter, finding basic necessities to rebuild lives. So she's hopeful in the sense that finally, because part of our service delivery in the NOOR program is also the immediate basic humanitarian needs. She said, okay, the prices are coming down for basic food items, not to the level where they were pre-war, but they are coming down, which means that people are optimistic that there will be a little bit more aid coming in, etc. But now we're moving to the struggle to finding the basic necessities to rebuild life as it emerges in the new context and the new realities that we're seeing.
Mhm. Well, actually, so you bring up something that I wanted to ask you about just generally, which is throughout the last 2 years, a lot of people, we had hosted a pooled fund. Everyone and their mother has been involved in either a GoFundMe campaign, a mutual aid campaign, whatever it is. And one of the things that people would consistently ask is, how does aid actually get delivered inside Gaza, right? So we're making all of these donations, but how does that money or that aid or that support actually get to the people who need it? And in this case, I would be interested to know how Taawon ensured that the services were reaching the population and the communities in need. What were the mechanisms that you were using at the time? And then what will you be using now again? Because just because there's a ceasefire doesn't mean that everything is khalas, back to normal.
We do actually, yes, we do face that question. There's two sides of the equation. You have the aid mechanism that is overseen by the UN system and the UN infrastructure. WHO brings a lot of goods, other UN agencies, and then you have actors like civil society organizations that are acting on the ground, like us there, that either we bring aid through one of these mechanisms that is the available through three of the corridors. That was before, of course, March. You remember March, beginning of March, the Israelis basically blocked closed all the corridors. But before that, one of these corridors, so we used to bring consignee through our consignees in Gaza, like the Red Crescent, the Palestinian Red Crescents in Gaza City. We used to bring either shipments of basic needs, clothes, blankets, tents, whatever, like any other agencies. However,
Mm-hmm.
after the closure, there was some commercial market available in Gaza. So we, as one of the service delivery organizations on the ground, we were buying from the local market. Israelis allowed a few commercial actors to bring some goods, other sort of merchants. So we were buying some, and there were some also Palestinian producers of green items, what we call the green food, like vegetables, and at enormous prices. So we were also using local market. However, sort of the whole mechanism of reaching to the end users, which is back to your question, was through um, uh, the frontline Palestinian volunteer or organized NGO sector. We have 50 active organizations that work at the neighborhood level. They know the people, they know each other. They run daily kitchens, they run community level delivery services. In our case, we developed a database of the 20,000 orphans that we serve, and we have close to 9 local partners, NGOs, trusted NGOs that we work with, where they we divide the population depending on the geography, the north, center, south, by city, where they would have 1,000, let's say, families that they are supposed to serve. Make sure that these families, this 1,000 families, either in Gaza City or in Deir al-Balah, they got their weekly basket of food, that the kids registered within these families are checked by the clinics or by the NGO that provide the healthcare. So we developed a really, I would say, advanced mechanism of also data collection, monitoring, and reaching to each individual where they are. Of course, this got complicated because of the frequent request for displacement that is forced on the population. So,
Mm-hmm.
we every month or 2 weeks we need to make sure that retag where is this family. They moved from Gaza, Deir al-Balah, Mawasi. It's an exercise of guessing where the family is. But the good thing is also people do have mobile numbers. So we have also the mobile numbers of all the mothers or all the grandparents that are responsible, the caregivers of these children, and so we're able to also do that tracking. So it's an enormous operation, and in terms of scale. So we're talking about 9 NGOs. They are the 9 was called grassroots partners that are working with us. Each one probably have a team of 20, 30. So we're talking about 200 people
Mhm.
working just to make sure that the service reaches to the 20,000 orphans that are registered in our care program. And in terms of money flow, again, this is another question that comes often. How do you actually pay for
Mhm.
this? I mean, because we are a Palestinian NGO, we have our bank accounts with the Bank of Palestine, so we transfer to all these NGOs that they have their bank accounts because the banks were operating in Gaza before the war, and so the same. So we do basically wire transfer, and they're able to use electronic wallets to pay their employees. Uh, there's always a problem when you try to cash in that money, because then you lose also another percentage because
Mhm.
of converting. And that's another story. I'm not going to get into the details, but just this is to give you a map of how the operational, which is important that people know at the end of the day, because we we we're extremely serious about how the value chain of from the donation that any donors make anywhere in the world until it reaches the child in Gaza, and the reverse monitoring of did they get that service or not, was it adequate or not.
Mhm.
Even now after the war, we have a team of six staff of Taawon. Their job is to go and verify that um, the children in the program receive the services we claim to have or to ensure that they have received it. So there's
And
even
these
in the war, there is a monitoring system to make sure that they have received that service.
and
Mm.
these are all staff members who are local in Gaza. So they're, I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
presumably going through exactly the same kind of challenges and having to face it while also, making sure that they're doing their jobs. I mean, that's incredibly challenging. Um,
Uh, and sometimes, I mean, the enormous sense of pressure and dedication that they have to feel, and they and worry occasionally when there were times in July and August where the intensity of bombing was so intense that even any small gathering to deliver food or clothes, it became a high risk operation, and the staff had to make sure should the partner do it or not, and think about it quite frequently. But we have one dedicated to look after the emergency food supply, another monitors the access to the health services, a third staff dedicated on the psychosocial support and relief activities for the children. So we also keep them specialized in these areas. Mm.
and I know that you also early on had lost a few staff members. Like Taawun, I believe, also lost a few members in Gaza, correct?
We lost former employees were members of Taawon staff.
Okay.
One of them was also very active in the orphan program. If you recall, Taawon also did an orphan care program after the 2014 war and
Yes.
after the 2008. So Gaza has been subjected to too many conflicts, and that resulted in an unusually higher number of orphan children in a small area. And so we did, and so some of the previous staff in Towns programs, we lost, of course, as martyrs. Mhm.
Well, I also, one of the things that just throughout all of these last 2 years has been interesting to me, and I'd like to ask your perspective on this as well, is really with regard to the numbers and the official numbers, right? So for a very long time, we kept hearing the same kind of number repeated about the loss of, the those who were murdered. And so the number was something like 60,000. And I think I remember, we may have hit 60,000 in early 2024, but it just kept being the number that was repeated over and over again. And at some point, the Lancet report came out at some point, I think September of 2024, and said that it was actually probably close to 187,000 people. And then more recently, there have been estimates that came out that it was probably somewhere like, in the neighborhood of 600,000 people who've been martyred. And, when there's an interesting aspect of this, and I think I've mentioned this in another conversation at one point, but to say that the reasons why the Gaza Ministry of Health is so explicit and so accurate about the numbers that they produce and that they publicize is that they're for reasons of credibility, they're only listing numbers that they can verify of bodies that they've been able to identify, and in a way that it's kind of this used to hurt me so much to think, like, I know that they know that there's more people dead. I know they know this. But the reason that they can only state numbers that are verifiable is because we've made such an effort, as Palestinians, to try to stick with the facts so that no one can come back and say, oh, look, they're exaggerating. Oh, look, they make things up. Oh, look, they're trying to be victims. And so by that token and by that logic, the numbers of orphans that we're listing, and we're stating 39,000, 40,000 orphans, do you imagine it's a higher number than that in reality?
And I fully agree with you on this, on the premise that the numbers are probably higher than what is officially stated. And you're absolutely right that the Ministry of Health is quite careful to release the numbers of those, either uh, the number of deaths, the number of what's called war injuries, the number of amputees. We've been tracking systematically, for example, the number of amputees. And we just released, we're about to release a report. This is another case that we're studying. We're just about to release a report on the war injuries and amputees in Gaza. This is another program Taawon is involved in. And we've been just for the last month really careful to get exactly the numbers. So we've been waiting until the WHO and the Ministry of Health kind of verified some of these numbers. But I
Mhm,
suspect that the number is quite higher because not all families have been able to report cases. Not there are cases also in which you have births that happened in the last 2 years
mhm,
that not also to probably to orphaned where the father might have been killed or died and martyred, but they have not been able to register them. Um,
mhm,
so we're looking at a population now. The estimates, the general estimates is around 40,000. But what I can tell is about the numbers we have in Taawon. In Taawon, we have we since the start of the war, we opened a registration system for families to or any caregiver to log in if they have orphan children because of the current war, not
mhm,
previous. And it took us a year to verify this data until we reached so we have in our database 20,000 cases. I mean, there are numbers 20,000 and something, but this shows 20,000 plus that are verified cases of the child or the children lost one or both parents or the extended family. And then
mhm,
we have, on top of that, another close to 16,000 cases in the system that we have not yet analyzed because we are not, we're, our capacity even to absorb more orphan in the program has been yet developed. So if
right,
you add the 16,000 cases, assume there is a factor of error of usually when we clean the previous data, 20% error. So you take
mhm,
another 4,000. So that is 32,000 cases just in our database we
Mm-hmm.
are looking at. If you look at and that's not all that, I mean, because some families did not register on our platform.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying when we're saying 40,000 is probably an underestimation of the real number. And
Mm-hmm.
you add on top of this another 30,000 orphan child before the October 7th. There were already almost a population of 30,000 orphan child in Gaza before October.
Mm-hmm.
So you add these 30,000 to the current 40,000, you're talking about a population of almost 70,000. And this is population-wise, this is a high percentage, and
Of course.
also statistically, the highest number of children becoming orphan in a conflict in a short period of time happened in
Mm-hmm.
Gaza worldwide historically, and
Mm-hmm.
because there are other conflicts, like if you look at the Syrian conflict, or you look at the
Mm-hmm.
Lebanese conflict, if you look at historically, also even now Ukraine, the rate of orphan children was spread wider over many years, but in a very short time, you have a ballooning of number of orphan children, which requires also special attention, special care.
Of
Yeah.
course. Which then, of course, explains the NOOR program, which I want to ask you about. But I want to ask you from a different perspective, rather than just kind of telling us what the NOOR program is, which I want you to do. But I want to bring it in from the context of the of orphans and in our region. Okay, and I ask this because, look, I grew up in the Arab region. I'm Egyptian Palestinian, and for for all of my childhood, I remember kind of asking my parents about what happens to orphaned kids, like what happens in our region to orphaned kids, because we would hear about, adoption stories in the West and all these like beautiful families being created. And I had always been kind of told the story of how in our region, in our culture, in our, in Islam, it's not really you don't deal with orphans the same way that maybe you do in kind of a Western context. And that for a very long time, adoption is something that was illegal, right? And then you would hear of families who had adopted, but min taht il taht, and they're not really kind of publicizing it. And then more and more, I know that there's been, I know in Jordan, for example, there's been like a push even to reclassify the designation of orphan children so that they come from, it's a bit more dignified, the designation, rather than just without family or without parents. And so there's been a push kind of moving progressively towards something a little bit more um formal and a bit more public. That's one thing. The other thing is, I know we have the concept of kafala in our culture and in our religion, and in our policies and government, governance policies. But one of the things that struck me when this first started, and when the numbers had started to come out about, oh, Gaza's starting to see a ballooning of orphan children, was that a lot of people, very well intentioned, and really coming from a place of like passion and wanting to help, were suddenly, flooding social media with like, how can we adopt these kids? How can I take, I want to take in all these children from Gaza. And I remember noticing the backlash from Palestinians and from communities in Gaza, kind of saying, yeah, keep your hands off of our children, right? Like if there are children who are orphaned in Gaza, the Gazan community will take care of them. If you want to help, you can help by helping us support these orphans. But the answer isn't to have this kind of, savior fantasy where you're going to swoop in and adopt all of Gaza's Gaza's orphans. And I think this kind of, catalyzed an interesting conversation around this. And then you see a program like Taawon. NOOR is one of the most ambitious programs you've ever launched. And it's across 18 years. I mean, it's a commitment of, the life cycle of a child into adulthood. And so I'm just curious if you can, from that context and from that perspective, give a little bit of insight into what is it specifically about the NOOR program that is different from other orphan sponsorships? And how was it created to kind of, react to this sudden need for people to, feel like they wanted to help support?
So thanks, Naila, for the question. I think you raise a very important question, and sort of how do we relate to the idea of yutam, to be orphan in such a context, and also in a context of continuous violence, I would say. Now, Gaza is experiencing daily violence, the violence of war, the violence of being also imprisoned before October 7th, and even after, of course, that the degree. And I think sort of the philosophy and the thinking around NOOR came not suddenly, but came also from Taawon's experience with the two previous programs that we launched. They were much smaller in scale, 1,500 orphans when we started with Mustaqbali, and then the other one that started in 2009 after there was a big sort of war in 2009 on Gaza, and then 2014 another program where we had 2,500 cohort in the program. And we learned throughout the process is the idea that you need to develop. So one is the service delivery. Let me talk about the service delivery, but also the philosophy of the program. The service delivery is that we accustomed in the region with the idea of the kafali. With the kafali, it's a cash, you give it to the child, or to the caregivers. But in many contexts, you're not sure that this kafali reaches is used to be spent on the child, and so we kind of abandoned this approach, and we said this has to be a care-based approach, a comprehensive service delivery to make sure that the child and the caregivers are enabled to provide comprehensive care in terms of the basic needs, education, healthcare, psychosocial support, empowerment to the mothers and the caregivers. So kind of, and then we focused the design around these kind of approaches, and evolved from that. And I think now what we call it the approach is a 360 care approach. I mean, the child deserves to have all the services and growing up in a safe environment. And of course, there's always challenges in making sure that these are ensured in a volatile context, in a changing context. The second aspect of the thinking around the program is the idea of embeddedness, and this is where comes the idea or the notion of fostering and adoption, and which is yes, within our culture is not necessarily seen as the right way to take care of children. Although I'm personal level, I am agnostic to this whole philosophy. Adoption can, if it's the right. I mean, every child deserves and deserves a safe place to grow, learn, and develop, and we shouldn't make judgments on that. But of course, if the social context is does not allows it, then we really have to find solutions for that. But in the Palestinian context, and particularly in the Gaza context, it's very important that we understand the idea of the child is embedded in a bigger social context, in the family, in the tribe, and so and we have seen studies where sometimes the child with the grandparents maybe fares better than being left in an orphanage. There were a lot of there were orphanage even in Gaza before 2007, and some of them were destroyed. Most of them were destroyed. But the number of children in the orphanages were less than the capacity. So they were like a capacity, let's say, of 2,000 child, but the number were 800. So some of the families wanted to keep the children and take care of them in the extended. So there was actually this idea of being part of the social fabric of the bigger extended family is well suited. And then so we wanted to work with that logic and say, then let's enable that in this notion of embeddedness, that the child sort of is receiving all the services and at the same time, there is a mechanism to monitor cases where there might be child right abuse, or all these things
Mm,
have to be also factored into this kind of model because it requires a bit more extra effort. But now, as I
hmm
said, we're dealing with the basic building blocks of really just making sure that the families and the children are getting their basic needs under the current sort of context, and building the other components as we move forward into a long-term perspective. And the last
Yeah.
point I want to raise on the 18-year model is that we have seen in previous conflicts and interventions that there's a lot of passion to support and deal with war injuries and orphan children. But then that passion fizzles out after the first or 2 years. You know, our collective memory is not long
Mm,
enough to see. So we and then these children after 2 3 years are left without access to any support infrastructure,
hmm
and talking about large numbers. So that's why we insisted that this have to be holistic. We need to think the long term. We need to upfront the support for these children, and that puts the pressure on the model itself, because we have to think of large sums of fundraising activities to really keep this machinery moving forward, and creativity on, as we are also part of the foundations forum, to think also how do you actually create sustainable financing for a kind of charitable project extending over 20 years. So this is also
Right.
challenges our conventional fundraising methods and invites us to think of new ways of creating sort of a long-term financing models to keep these children access to the services.
Absolutely. And I think, so what you just said brings up, I mean, several different things, but so one of them, to the latest point that you just made, around the sustainability of fundraising and the sustainability of funding. We are hosting our AFF 20th anniversary biannual members meeting in December in Amman. So we're going back to where it all started, which is amazing. And one of the main things that we are going to be talking about is obviously the changing landscape of funding and grant making and fundraising in today's environment. And frankly, again, like I don't want to say that Gaza is the only crisis that's happened in the last 10 years that is of any, pivotal importance, but it certainly plays a very, very, very big role, I think, in highlighting some of the biggest issues and challenges we've had in this ecosystem and in our sector. And a lot of the time that we are going to spend in our members meeting, and I'm going to ask my team just to make sure to put a link to the registration in our chat here so other people, participants can register to join us, please. But we are going to be talking a lot about exactly this. And I think, at some point, Tariq, the Taawon model, this new approach is going to be an interesting case study, because you are presenting a very tangible crisis that requires a rethinking and a reimagining of the way we fund issues. You can't get anything more urgent than children. You just can't, right? You can't get anything more urgent and more um kind of well, urgent is the word I'm looking for. That's the right word. But then what happens to the future of children? And so if you're going to take a model, a case study of what are the components that are required to sustain a fun, a program or a project that requires strategic thinking around how do you fund this kind of thing. The NOOR model, I think, is a very, very interesting one, and is something that we should probably collectively kind of look at as, over time and in a kind of longitudinal study type of way, right? That's one thing. The second thing is just amusing. But when you're talking about the embeddedness and this kind of tribal factor, the extended family factor, again, this is one of those things that really just kind of kept coming up for me over the last 2 years, about the difference from the Western perspective of what makes a family, that very kind of that focus on the nuclear family, the mother, father, and 2.2 children, which was a statistic I always thought was so interesting. Like, what do you mean 2. How can you have 2.2 children? Um, but that's, before I understood statistics. And just this idea that like there's that kind of context of the sanctity of the nuclear family, and it is devoid of this understanding of your entire community can help raise your kids. Your entire tribe, like you said, um, plays a part and plays a role. And it's a very interesting kind of dichotomy, right? In that understanding. And so that's why I say, like, when all of these people from around the world were like, we want to adopt these children, and we were like, you don't need to. We don't have that kind of culture where we're going to give up our children that easily. But there are other ways that you can help. And this NOOR program is one of them. Um, so one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, because you've mentioned several times the different components of this program, of this kind of holistic approach: education, social care, mental health and psychosocial support, health, humanitarian, all of these different components. First of all, I mean, just aside from the logistical kind of challenge that poses, particularly in this context, but can you explain a little bit more about how you see the integration of these 5 components, A, working in this context, B, working over time, like when things start getting a little bit more, there's a bit more facility, and then C, why that and not the focus on one or, one or two of those components rather than having this holistic view. Like, you're making it much more difficult for yourself, but there's obviously a reason why that's important.
Because fundamentally, it's because this is the basic building blocks of any safe, nurturing environment that a child needs to grow in. I mean, the child needs a good health, good nutrition, opportunity to learn and play, opportunity to dream for either for a profession. And I think just to give one of these, I mean, of course, and so these children lost either one or two or both parents, and and maybe they might be able to get in sort of in the absence of such a program, they might be able to get one or one of these basic services, but then that would limit the opportunities to really for them to fully integrate and build and lead a healthy life and grow and become very active, productive participants of their communities. And so the idea is to really think of what is the model, and we've been looking at different models of care, and so this is ideally sort of from an evidence point of view, the different models is really have to think holistically. And of course, parents naturally do this because they do it because they are parents. But in the absence of parents, sometimes caregivers are competing, are doing a lot of trade-offs, and so we need also to enable the caregivers to be able to deliver this comprehensive solution. So the integration is going to be a challenge, of course, as you said. So one idea we have in the program is that, as you mentioned, this is also a community. It's not a nucleus family role; it's a community role. It's the neighborhood role. So the idea is that within the different communities, there's always a community center that is supported, where kids can go and play in the afternoon, where counseling is provided. And so part of the design we have is that we have a number of these communities built into the care services, where there's also the power of the group, the moms or the dads can come together and talk about the children, and so community centers will be a key pillar of building that. Where of course we're hoping that we're even thinking of doing some of them in May and June. And then we saw attacks on some of these, community centers and cafes. Then we got scared for the kids, so we also stopped so we were thinking, even under the war, the bombing, we were thinking to do these, so that the orphans can. So, but that's part of the central part of the design to make sure that these services um, is delivered to the children.
Mhm.
There was one other aspect you raised about sort of thinking long term on these programs, 18 years, 20 years, is that it forces us to build the sustainability today so that we don't have to really just after 5 years start saying to few of the children, oh, we don't have money for you, please, so you have to graduate. So it's sort of drop the services. So this is really a disciplined way to think. Today, I need to make sure that by year 18, I graduate every single child from this program,
Mhm.
accessing the full range
Mhm.
of support.
I
Mhm.
mean, you said like, first of all, one of the things that you were saying about the integration of these five different components is so moving just because, the fact that you guys are thinking about it from what does a child need to thrive? What is the environment that a child needs to thrive? And it's such a dignified kind of thoughtful process of looking at.
And it takes us away from the kafala mindset. I mean, the kafala is important. It's the sense that, okay, we need to make sure that people commit financially, but we need to go away from the logic of the kafala, because it's just so limiting in the sense
Yeah,
it's not about handing out, because this generation is so traumatized, especially the ones in Gaza, that you
yeah,
need a lot of care to really lift them from the trauma, to make them, see hope and potential in any scenario, even rebuilding Gaza under any scenario that we see. I mean, we don't see, as you started the introduction, we don't see necessarily a very optimistic scenario currently in terms of political scenario, but
right.
people of Gaza need still to see hope and build and thrive despite. So sometimes we tell our donors, this is not a charity.
Right. Yeah, I understand. I know. Yeah. I mean, this is an entire generation. This is an entire generation. I know. Um, oof.
It is, yeah, it is an act of resistance and
Yeah.
defiance in a way.
Yeah.
Supporting
It
the
is.
children, for us, we see it in long term as a defiance, resistance, and of course, it is part also of thinking, okay, this is our right as a children to grow and nourish and be nourished. So that's also fundamentally the logic behind uh,
Yeah.
the program in terms of the support structure we're thinking about.
And that's why, I mean, I'm telling you, like, that's why it's so moving, just the thought process behind it. I think, a lot of times, Tariq, like, we look at these things, like you said, from this sort of logistical perspective, right? And at the end of the day, these are people's lives, and they deserve exactly the same dignity as anybody else. And whatever it is that we can do to kind of, to give back to that and to ensure that at least in the rebuilding process of something that is so traumatic. I mean, look, we're traumatized and we're not even there. Can you imagine, Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a very it's a very poignant point. And I think, look, one of the things around why we want to have these moments and we want to have these conversations that bring out some of the more vulnerable aspects of this work is we're a network, and this network has quite a far reach, and there's a few people on today's joining us today who are other members of our network. And we need to be able to talk about what are the things that we collectively as a network can do to help support each other. um, like you said, this is not a charity. So this is not a fundraising pitch. This is really a call for kind of solidarity and support in your you're implementing something that is going to last at the very least 18 years, right? For a very big group of children. And there are people on this call who have resources that can help support. And so what are some, like, tell me, what are some of the things that we can do, and what are partner organizations expected to be able to contribute and help support you with?
No, no, thank you very much for this. I mean, I think, of course, the needs are enormous, as you mentioned. We are looking at, of course, building a financial model that is sustainable long term, but also we're looking at the service delivery model and how to strengthen it through capacity building, through, for example, right now we're tapping into different skill sets around psychosocial support and how you actually how you build lives and overcome trauma in sort of in such a constant, because the Gaza context is quite special. I mean, everything is destroyed. It's not only the children that are traumatized; it's the parents, the grandparents, the whole society. So we need to learn better, and so we need to be systematic and learn better how to rebuild societies. And also as Palestinians, we need to sort of also uh, sort of shift away from the heroic narrative and think in terms of the human narrative. How do we
Right.
build human lives, and think together in terms of what do we need to grieve and to recover. Um, and so these aspects require also systemic research and monitoring, and embedding a bit of research instruments in the work we do, and a reflexive process. So our
Right.
partners can help us also build these reflexive processes in the work we
Right.
do.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you said something so critical, that narrative, there is something beautiful about a narrative of resilience, but resilience is required from trauma. I mean, there's a the reason you have a necessity for resilience is because it's trauma, and that's not heroic. I mean, that's a failure. That's a societal failure. It's a political failure. Um, I mean, my God, if we get into the politics of this, will never end. But you know what I mean? And
Yes, yes,
so
no, I
in
agree with you. I
right,
mean, we
yeah,
need to a bit to start changing the language a little bit in the public discourse as well, and accept that we're a traumatized society. We have experienced enormous amount of violence, and we need to rebuild the human side of us and the social fabric again, and we need to look at these issues systematically and deeply. Mm.
absolutely. And I think also the other thing that you were saying, which is again so incredibly moving, is just around, the these community centers, and you're talking about the support that this community is going to be giving to these orphans. And I just keep thinking, as you're saying that, I was like, but these people are traumatized themselves. I mean, you're putting you're putting the onus of responsibility, not you, but I mean, the onus of responsibility
Mhm.
on supporting these traumatized children are other traumatized adults who probably need as much, if not more, kind of, it's just anyway, that's why this whole initiative is it's just so moving. It's so beautiful. And I think again, it's that integration of all of these components that makes it that much more special, because it's not only a commitment from Taawon to these children, and to the community, because at the end of the day, if you help to build a generation of children who are better cared for, you also help to build stronger generations in the future.
Absolutely,
Um,
absolutely. Mhm.
and so that's a really beautiful commitment that you've made, but then also that you take on the responsibility. And I'm not trying to, like, romanticize Taawon's role. I know that you do this out of, I mean, it's the work that you need to do, it's the commitment that you've made. But I think it's important to recognize how impactful that is. And it's important for people to see that this is, when we talk about how can you help support Gaza's orphans, this is how. These are the kinds of programs that we need to amplify, that we need to fund. um, and again, I really am making this commitment to you, Tariq, in for our conversations at the AFF members meeting, to use this program and this initiative as a case study for the need for a reimagining of funding practices. Donors need to understand these 2-3 year models of grant making are just not going to
No,
work. They're
doesn't
just
work.
not going to work.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. We need to think long term. We need to build. Oh, and we need to use also blended instruments. We need to think of bonds, sukuk. We need to trust funds. We need to also combine quite a holistic and also corporate commitments long term. I mean, we have signed. I mean, as I said, Taawon, the NOOR program is a collective program. I wouldn't even say it's a Taawon program. Of course, Taawon is leading, but it's a national program. It's
Hmm.
for Gaza, and and we have so many partners with us in this endeavor, both Palestinian businesses, Arab funds, Arab philanthropies, very generous contributions, and then of course a large and thousands of donors as well from across the globe, from the
Hmm.
U.S., from Europe, from Saudi Arabia, from Emirates, from Pakistan, from Malaysia. All these are contributing also to the program. So we need to really build a whole community around the idea of a strategic long-term program. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. And can you look, we have about a minute left. So I I want to add, first of all, I mean, I'm so grateful that I know you had an incredibly busy day. I know you were running around. And I'm so grateful that you made the time to talk to us and to be vulnerable and to be open and to kind of like give us all of this really just in beautiful personal insight, which I told you when we connected in the
Mm.
green room, that this is what I like these conversations to be. I don't, the data, the information people can get anywhere, but this kind of personal insight is a little bit more special, I think, and I really appreciate it. So I want to give you the last minute, Tariq, just to kind of say, is there anything that you feel like we haven't covered? Is there anything that you'd like to? Is there an appeal that you'd like to make? Whatever it is that you want to say to close us out, I'm going to give you the floor to say it.
Well, no, thank you, Naila. You raised so many wonderful questions, and we had a very focused conversation on some of these issues. And I just want one more thing I just wanted to say is that um, this is I, the way I framed it earlier. We see this as a long-term strategic national project, and so we have so many partners working with us on this. And just want to use this platform to thank all of the partners that have been helping us on this journey, both in the Arab world and internationally. So this has been wonderful. So we would not actually been able to do this at Ta'awun without the partnerships that we did. And fundamentally, it's the people also in Gaza, and the teams,
Mhm.
the crews, the dedication we get from all the actors, the frontline NGOs that are working hard, and of course the staff that is just risking their lives on a daily basis to make sure that these services are delivered to the children of Gaza. And so I want to salute them also for the dedication, support, and commitment to this cause.
100%. 100%. Thank you so much, Tariq. Thank you so, so much. And I really am so grateful. Thanks for everything that you do. Thanks for everything that Ta'awun does. God bless you guys, all of you, and
Thank you.
especially your team in Gaza, my God. And we're here to support. You know that. You reach out anytime. So yeah, I really appreciate it. And to everybody else, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for sticking with us through this conversation. We shared a bunch of resources in the chat. Reach out to us. And I'm going to say this every single day until it's true. Free Palestine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Naila. Sure. Mhm. And I do
Bye.
look forward to seeing you at the Arab Forum in
Oh,
Amman.
100%. Absolutely. 100%. All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Bye.